Welcome to the Nomadic Closer Podcast, where the world is your office. We're here to help salespeople and entrepreneurs level up, break free from the 9-to-5, and live the location-free lifestyle. Each week, join us for real-life experiences from the pros, practical tips, and game-changing insights on how to succeed in sales, business, and life. This is the Nomadic Closer Podcast.
Hello, everybody. To introduce Mr. Ryan Pouwells. So
Hello.
it's great to have you on, buddy. I really do appreciate it. Joel's told me a lot about you. I've looked into a lot of the stuff that you're doing with Setter Central. I know a fair bit about sort of your background, where you're coming from. So for those of you who don't know Ryan, I believe you used to work with it was like Sales Sniper or something. You basically headed up a lot of their sort of like setting and everything like that, and you're sort of transitioning into doing your own thing. And from what I've seen, man, you're fucking smashing it. So again, it's a really good. It's an honor to have you on with us, buddy. And I'm excited to sort of like jump into some things with you. But if you'd like to introduce yourself, sort of tell people who you are, what you do, then please do.
Cool. Yeah. Appreciate you having me on. And in terms of where we're at, so yeah, I started in sales about 2 years ago now. I would say April of last year, in terms of coming across like the YouTube world and coming across some of the bigger names in the space. And that was a while ago, but that was that was still during COVID. And then at that time, kind of just put my head down, got to work. I was fortunate enough to land in obviously an environment that was conducive to learning and standards really high, and some of the best in the space, definitely, maybe biased, but for sure, in my opinion. And really enjoyed my time there as well. And then just was able to kind of work hard, learn some skills, and then transitioned into doing my own thing in January with my buddy, Danny, my business partner there. And that's what we've been doing now is Setter Central. So we've been 6 weeks into that on the dot, actually, February 15th. So we're 6 weeks into that full time, January 1st. So that brings us to where we're at today, man. So it's been crazy. Yeah.
That's amazing, man. What was it, if I can ask, like, what was it that kind of prompted you guys to start sort of getting out there doing your own thing?
Yeah, for sure, man. I think two things, three things come to mind. So number one is, whilst Dan and I were still like full-time reps, we were still doing the thing full-time, in sales. We put together like just a free training portal, along with Erica Copina, did some of the DM setting stuff. And like, we just threw it on a teachable platform, and it was free. It was super unedited. It was, Dan and I were just like, yo, let's just sit down, like shoot this thing. And it was like basically a 40-minute Zoom with like a slideshow, like a PowerPoint. Nice. And we kind of just banged through it, and we're like, cool, whatever. Put that on to a teachable platform, opened a Facebook group. That was probably 7 months ago, 8 months ago, something like that. Yeah, 6, 7, 8 months ago. And then that kind of grew organically just through Teachable in the Facebook group from like zero. I think that first 50 or 100 people that I added were all my friends and colleagues. And I was just like, yo, and it was kind of jokes at the time, right? It was super jokes. It was just like, whatever, like just join this group. Like, it's just is what it is. It's super funny to me. And then that group freaking grew from zero to about like 14 or 1,500 people on Facebook from about the time we started up until like December. Wow. So that's while we were still full-time, doing the thing in sales. So it was kind of it wasn't like jump in and start it from completely scratch. It was a little bit of, there had been some momentum, and it seemed like the market responded like favorably to that. So that was kind of a head start that I don't think maybe most people know. Maybe it's like, oh, they just showed up and kind of crushed it. But it was like this little...
I think that's it as well. Like, it's something I see with a lot of successful people, right? Especially when they transition to doing their own thing. It's like they've been doing the thing before. It's not like they just had an idea one day and they were like, oh, we're going to build a course. I know nothing about it. We're just going to build a course. Yeah. But you guys, because you have been doing it for a few years, I'm sure that sort of a lot of people probably knew you in the space, like they knew who you were, like some of the stuff that you did. And they were like, this guy's really fucking good. And then when you start doing your own thing, they're like, oh shit, he's got his own thing out. All right, cool. Let's check it.
No, it's kind of like a perfect storm in that case. Yeah, for sure.
That's amazing, man. And I guess with Seta Central, like, just kind of give me a rundown, because, I've been through the sort of start, the content that you guys have at the moment. Like a few guys in the nomadic closer community are in there as well. Like, what's kind of the goal with this business for you, buddy? Like, what are you guys trying to do with it? What's the mission?
Yeah, I mean, as far as it's still kind of the same. As far as like a mission value, I don't really know if we have one at the time. Maybe that's a bad thing or a taboo to say at this stage. But I mean, for us, like, we kind of identified like an actual, like, from my estimation, my perspective, which could very well be off, a gap in the market in terms of a lot of, like, the way that this space kind of started. And I would say I was probably a year like late to it, if you will. Like, not late, but
when did you get into it specifically?
Just 2 years ago. So I know it's been around.
Same, about the same as me. Yeah.
Maybe a year before that was like the first huge wave, from what I understand. And that marketing at that time had been more of like a biz op, leave your 9 to 5, be a closer type of thing. Yeah. And of course, where the marketing kind of goes, that's where the attention goes. Where the attention goes, that's where the people go. And that's how a lot of people kind of, the influx in the space happened. So from what I kind of had seen, and what Danny had seen as well, is just seemed like there was a gap in the space specifically for setting. And it makes sense because it's fairly unsexy, like, for sure, right? Like, people don't want to get into the space and necessarily want to be setters, at least for the long term, depending on the individual, but people want to be closers. So it was kind of like that gap in the market.
Why do you think that is? Why do you feel like a lot of people, they're not willing to sort of go out and start setting?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think people don't know what they don't know. And if the marketing says go this and be a closer because of these reasons, like, I think that's good enough for a lot of people. And they're like, they think that's what they want. And then I think
it's like start your own e-commerce business, become a millionaire tomorrow, right?
Right.
It's like, I want that. And they don't realize all the steps that are actually involved in doing it. Because I know for me, like, when I got started in sales, I remember I had a cold calling job, right? I was doing like 200-300 calls a day. And like, that for me, when I was getting into sales, was so fucking good, because it got you over the initial, oh shit, I got to push a button, I got to make a call, I got to talk to a stranger, right? But like, I know for me, like, having done that kind of thing, it makes everything you do in sales so much easier moving forward. Because if you can do the hard things easily, the easy things, it's like nothing, at least that's kind of what I kind of found, right? Like, and I'm curious from your perspective, man, like, I know a lot of people, they want to sort of get into closing straight away, even without having that background. But like, what would you kind of say to those people from your perspective, having worked in the industry as long as you have?
I think where a lot of this came from my perspective as well, is that's exactly how I did get started in sales. Like, when I showed up in sales, I had just come from college, university, played baseball, so I'd been in like an environment that's similar to sales, I would say, in terms of like just a high level sport. And
it's funny you say that. Every salesperson I meet who's good, it's like sales is sports
and military. Yeah,
exactly.
That's like, or just crazy people, right? Like, just people that are a little bit weird in the head, which those guys are always successful. But a lot of this too, I mean, organically just came from, this is like literally the exact path that I took as well. And it's the path that I had to take, because when I showed up in sales, I had like 0 verifiable skills, and I have like just a little bit higher of a skill set now compared to 0. But when I showed up, I was like, yo, I work hard and I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to eat shit, kind of like you'd said. I'm willing to do all of those things for a long period of time for a delayed payoff, because I came from a world where I played baseball for like 20 years, since I was 6 all the way up. And I knew that to get really good at a craft and really master it, or you're never going to master it, but to get on a path where you can become extremely good at it, in my experience, it was start at the bottom and kind of work your way up. So for me, and how was I going to get hired anywhere? Anyways, I had no skills. I was like, yo, what's the least skilled thing that the people don't really want to do? Put me in there. I'll work hard. I'll get after it. I'm willing to learn. And then I did that for 6 or 7 months. Like, I just did outbound for 6 or 7 months before I ever took like an inbound triage call. And I did that for another couple of months before I ever started taking a closing call. So I probably was in sales for like 8 months before I started closing. Now, I think that's maybe that's something to do with me in terms of lack of a skill set. Maybe people could do it quicker. I don't know. Probably have. But also,
I think
just
if I could touch on that, buddy,
from the bottom.
It's something you said there. Like, you're absolutely right. It's like, if you want to get into the SAS, you have to go through boot camp, months, years of fucking training before you can actually be that absolute savage who goes out on the most crazy missions in the world, right? You don't just go from, I'm sitting on my sofa eating some fucking popcorn, to now I'm in the Middle East going to assassinate a Taliban leader. Nothing in life works like that. And it's a big thing. Like, I see a lot of people sort of like coming through from, our side who are new in sales, and they're like, yeah, I want a closing job. I want to get onto closing. And it's like, what have you sold? Nothing. What courses have you taken? I haven't taken any. I watched some YouTube videos. And it's almost like an unrealistic expectation, because life doesn't work like that. You have to put in, like with me being a bodybuilder, right? I've been going to the gym for like nearly a decade now. In fact, I think spot on, about a decade. I've only got as big as I am because I consistently go to the fucking gym, eat tons of fucking food, train my ass off. More like, people think I'm mental when I go to the gym. I'm screaming and shouting everywhere. But that didn't happen straight away, I didn't just walk into the gym massive. It took time, effort, dedication, and action. And from sort of your sort of journey, it sounds like it was the same, right? Like, you knew it from sports, just like I did. And like and it's one of the things that stood out is like, I was willing to eat shit. That's all I did for like a year and a half, man. I was just constantly eating shit, investing in courses, eating shit again and again and again. So people saying no, 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 no. And then eventually something just kind of clicks, and it's like, oh shit, I'm starting to get it now. I've sort of built up that skill set over time to where I can actually, transition into like being a real closer. And for me, I got started in sort of sales before sort of high ticket closing. I even knew about it. I was doing like medical insurance, window sales, that kind of shit. I had a marketing agency for a bit. So I kind of had that experience before I sort of did DM setting, or before I was doing triages and inbound calls and closing calls. But it was even then, like, moving into the closing position, it was very different than what I knew sales to be. And like, another thing you kind of mentioned is like, before I mastered it, but you never really master it, right? That's huge, man. Because some people, and you've probably seen this, right? They do 3 courses and they're like, I'm the fucking master of sales now. You see them 6 months later and they're back working a 9 to 5. And it's like, what happened, man? You were crushing it. It's like, yeah, no, sales just didn't really work out for me. It could have, tell me if I'm wrong, but like, I see people like that. And the only reason you're not going to get far in sales is because you give up. You stop sort of pursuing things. And if it takes being a setter for 8 fucking months and then doing inbound calls for another 3 months just to get there, my perspective is you have to just ask yourself, is it worth it to have the amount of money you want in your life, to feel more fulfilled, to feel happier and more joy? Is it worth it to eat shit for almost a year to do it? Right? And like, in terms of sort of the stuff that you guys are up to now, I wanted to ask, you mentioned it was a bit of a gap in the market around setting. And I wanted to ask specifically, like, who are the type of people you typically help at the moment? Like, is it newer people? You're training kind of experienced people as well? Like, what are you guys kind of up to?
Yeah. So what we're doing right now is we kind of have 2 separate wings, I suppose. So like, there's a B2B side where we're helping a handful of businesses specifically on the setting processes, the outbound processes. And like, a good outbound, I mean, it's not really a magic bullet in terms of like, I don't think it's the best way to run a business, like the only stream, but it can be effective when done well to kind of get more out of what's already happening, if the business is already crushing it. So that's kind of one half. But on the B2C side, right now, it's just like anybody who wants to come across it. I don't think we've even sat down and been like, cool, is this a thing where, like, obviously, I think to this point, existing setters, people who are kind of already in the space are pretty much the people that have been coming across the content and I guess consuming it and learning. Yeah. And then, I don't know, maybe in the future, it is more of it just seems like a big jump to make of like taking the more 9 to 5 biz op angle, but maybe that's the move. I don't know. It's something that I've still been thinking about. It's like, I'm not sure, but it might save people from taking a 9 to 5 jump to want to be a closer and then having to really be set back 3 or 6 months. Cause it's like, hey, that's that's just not realistic. I mean, it obviously excluding outliers, but that's kind of where we're at right now. So I would say more, people that are already setting, people that are already in the space. And that's another reason that we kind of wanted to do something along these lines. And that's why a lot of our all of our stuff up till now on the B2C side has been completely free. Like everything has been for free so far. All the portals on Circle, the Facebook group, everything's been for free because like it just didn't seem like there was information in the space, of course, for setters. And it's kind of like a catch-22 where it's like, cool, you want to become a closer. Maybe you realize that's a big journey. So it's like, I need to start setting. And then it's like, okay, I need to start setting, but where do I start? Like, how do I do that? Because all the information's around closing. So maybe that has led people to like jump into the closing programs because they're looking around. They're like, yo, how do I even learn how to set? So it's kind of, and I think that's just fleshing out a bit more in the market specifically of, from what I think of, it doesn't seem like there's an ecosystem or an area for people to go learn specifically that skill. So that's kind of what brought us to where we're at.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, man, because like, I know some setters who fucking crush it. They make more than a lot of closers do. And I think it's a big thing. Like people have sometimes the wrong expectations about setting. They're like, in setting, you can't really make much money. You might make 2-3K a month. But like from your experience, man, like what have you seen in regards to like, people who are good at setting? What sort of commissions are they earning, and like what separates them from the setters that are only earning sort of 2,000-3,000 a month?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that brings up a good point, man. I think there's a couple answers to that question. I think what separates, and this is something that I just learned in sales in general, I think what separates setters is obviously skill, like of course, same thing as closing. Like the best closers are going to earn the most, the best setters are going to earn the most typically. But I think where my perspective has changed a lot since my time in the space so far has been like actually the opportunity that somebody's offered or the opportunity that they're on is like, are you even in a position? Because someone who's like, okay, in an amazing opportunity is always going to out earn like an absolute weapon of like a skill set in an opportunity where it's just not feasible to,
like
to get
Marco
to.
Cortese, right? He was selling a fitness offer earning like 2,000-3,000 a month. And he's one of the best in the world. And then he transitions to high ticket sales and he's doing 100,000 a month in commissions. And it's a big thing because you are right. The offer is a big part of how much you're going to make, but so is your skill set and also like your dedication, the amount of action you're willing to put in. And it's something that, I sort of live by is like to live an extraordinary life, you have to do the things that ordinary people are not willing to do, right? So if you're a setter and you're earning like 2,000-3,000 a month and there's someone else in your company who's earning 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000, what are they doing differently? Like not just like, what are they saying on the calls, but what's their morning routine? What does their day look like from the time they get up to the time they go to sleep? And like, from your perspective, like what have you seen some of the common traits be, bar, skill set, bar sort of just doing the work in those people who actually are earning much higher commissions from setting versus the people who are sort of like the lowest in their company?
Yeah. And I think that's a good point is kind of a metric to use in that case would be like, what is the top setter earning in my actual position at this actual company? Because now it's a battle of the environment is the same. So now it comes down to what is one person doing that the other's not. Because sometimes it can be like comparing apples to oranges where it's like, cool, that dude's making X, but I'm making this. You could be a lot better. You're just not in a position to actually make that money. But I think, the difference, I think that just comes down to like, it could be the same thing in any pursuit is like, why does somebody outperform the other person in the exact same spot? I think for me, it just comes down to like a level of work ethic, a level of grit, a level of consistency, a level of discipline, and just like realizing why you're doing the things that you're doing and your ability to delay gratification and just continue to focus on like the inputs and what's right in front of you to delay, where you want to go and just focusing on that. But I think like looking back at it, and even now, my two things that have carried me the furthest, both in sports and in sales, has just been like grit, like having a little bit of fuck you, where it's just like, you're just resilient and you just get into it and you just continue to show up, and then just consistency as well. So like, rather than this huge boom and this big bust and you're out of it for 3 days and then you're burned out and then you crush it for a week and then you're out for a week and then It's just like, dude, like how can you just stay extremely level, and how can you just be reliable, like for yourself and for the company, for the business owner? I think those two things really separate.
I guess when it comes to like that consistency side of things, right? Because I think most people, they understand like, you know, what it means to be consistent from a high level. But like, if you look at that in sort of like the day-to-day perspective, what would you say is going to make someone a more consistent setter versus one of these people who sprint for a few days, fucking smash it, they're off for a week, then sort of go through these massive ebbs and flows of commissions that they make?
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest cheat code, man, is environment, to be completely honest. Like,
what do you mean by
just
environment?
getting around an environment where that is the standard. Like there's no other option. So it doesn't really matter like how you feel or what you think, because when everybody else around you is doing the thing and that's just the stated, agreed upon, this is how it's done here, like at this company or in this place, I think that allows people like getting around that environment, because it can be difficult if you're on an island and you feel like it's just you versus you. Like you're going to have a much tougher time than if you're surrounded by a support system of people doing similar things, taking similar actions, where the standard's kind of set. And it's like, okay, now it's like that positive momentum from where you are that will really help push people. But if it's just you versus you, it's just like, I suppose it's just like something that I keep top of mind as well, is that like the scoreboard resets every single day. So it doesn't matter. Again, it's coming from sports, right? It's like, doesn't matter if we lost by 10 or won by 10, because today it's a tie game. Like, and we have to go do the thing again. And then just rechecking or like the individual just rechecking their levels of commitment. So that's something that's helped me as well, is just getting crystal clear, and even like rereading or re-immersing myself into like why I actually do the things that I'm doing anyways, and like where I'm headed and why it's important to me. Because like no matter what skill you're learning, setting's no different, closing's no different. Like it'll always be a big valley where you start off and this is like the top of shiny object syndrome. So everyone's super stoked. They're like, I'm going to crush it. This is awesome. And then you kind of fall into this valley. And then down here is where people are like, fuck that. And, you know, they want to leave. They want to go try something else. And then it's like, cool. What typically happens is you jump back. And I've been there as well, of course, is like you jump back to another shiny object because you want to be at the top of the valley. You don't want to be in the middle, because it's like, it's so hopeless sometimes.
It's a phrase in the army, I think they use, is called like embrace the suck, right? Yeah. You just got to like deal with it, man. You know, like whenever you're in that sort of that valley where things are shit, you're not earning as much money as you want to, instead of just going, oh, fuck, but what if I start a marketing agency, or, you know, maybe I can go do an Amazon store, or I can do X and Y and Z, or Z as we English say. Go do these other things. Instead is just go like, right, why did I fucking do this to begin with? You know, like what was the thing that got me into this? Why am I actually trying to learn these skills to be a better setter or better closer, whatever? And just keep fucking going. Embrace the suck. Like just set the expectation that it's shit right now, and it's going to probably keep being shit. But if I just keep going, eventually it won't be. You know, because that's exactly what like my journey was like. You know, it's like a year of like terrible commissions, not earning the amount of money I wanted to, bad lead flow, sales processes, etc. And eventually, it just went like that. And then I never looked back. And I was so happy and, you know, grateful that I stuck with it, because I'd seen other people get out of the industry and now I earn fucking 10 times more than them. And because they've gone and started this, and this, but they're always at stage one. And, you know, for guys like you, guys who are smashing the industry, you're at like stage 11 because you just never gave up on the opportunity, right? Marion asked an interesting question in the chat, actually, on the Facebook Live. He said, what if the business model makes the earnings of a setter dependent on the ability of the closer to close business? Because then it doesn't matter how good you are at setting. If the closers are shit, what are you going to do?
Yeah. It's also really, even on the B2B side, this is something that, it's a really good question. Something that I've came to realize very quickly is, regardless of how good or how poor a setting process is, or the setter themselves, you're always tied to what actually matters, which is making money for the business. And that is what actually matters in terms of the business, is where the closer is, right? So like, that's the only thing. Like, and I'm not sitting here thinking, you know, saying that setting is like the end all be all. And realistically, if the processes or the setter isn't contributing in more revenue and more cash for the business, it doesn't matter what we're doing. But it's really interesting because you could have a terrible setting process or be a bad setter and get bailed out by really good closers, or vice versa. You could be the best setter in the world, have the best process, quote unquote. And if you have poor setters, you're going to be tied to it. So I think that's, in terms of, that's just kind of, a pill that has to be swallowed within the industry as a setter, unfortunately, is like, I would just, hopefully you can get around, people who are good at what they're doing in terms of closing, because it's not something that's unavoidable.
Yeah. And what would you say to a setter in terms of like, they're evaluating opportunities? They have 3 presented to them. Yeah. What would you say like to look for to know that that's going to be a good opportunity versus a bad opportunity, right? Because a lot of people do what I call offer hopping. They'll be on one thing for a month and then they're like, I don't like this, move to another one, because the grass is always greener. But it's kind of tied to Marion's question, right? Like, I guess what would you say to a setter who's looking at opportunities? How do you choose the right one? Yeah, it's a good question. I think it just comes down to how many people are currently in the position that I'm looking to join. So like specifically as well, like I don't want to be the first DM setter. I don't really want to be the first outbound setter. I don't want to be the first triager. Like ideally, all things equal, and just like closing, I don't want to be the first closer. Like I think this industry, at times it can be tough for people because like sometimes business owners just think sales reps are like the magic bullet and that's the guinea pig. And it's like, hey, they'll fix my business. And it's like, man, obviously if it's a really good closer, you have the highest likelihood. But I think in terms of setting, I would just say, I would hopefully get clear on, is anyone else in that position at the specific company that I'm looking to join? So like, cool, if I want to be a DM setter, how many DM setters do you have right now? How long have they been in that position? What do they all earn in commissions per month? Right. And then in terms of the closers, the same thing. Even if I'm a setter, I'm like, cool, how many closers do you have? What are they averaging on commissions each month? How much is the business doing in revenue? And not even revenue, how much is cash is collected each month? That's all that matters, profitability. Yeah. And then how much new cash each month versus renewals, right? Or like payment plans from previous months, because maybe they're crushed it for 6 months and now it's a stream. So it's just like, these are things that are always going to be told are really, really, really good up front. And then you kind of get in, you're like, wow, this is what I thought it was. So it can be difficult, but I think the amount of due diligence that someone's able to do up front just saves yourself a lot of time. And that'd be my only word of advice, would just be to, hopefully you're not the first person in, hopefully you're not the guinea pig. Like ideally you want to get in and be like, cool. Like we said earlier, because if you're comparing apples to oranges, it's not fair. But if there's a DM setter on this account who's been there for 6 months and he's doing $7K a month, $8K a month, $10K a month, I'm like, cool, sign me up. Because I can now have something to shoot for that I know is realistic, that's happening right in front of me at this company right now with these leads, with these closers, with this marketing, so that's and what about like working on more than one offer at a time for setters? Because a lot of the best closers, they'll always have more than one offer. They'll be doing more than one thing. Because what I've seen in the industry is like, some offers, there's ebbs and flows with lead flow. Like for 3 months, the lead flow is great. And then it's bad for 2 months. And when that happens, especially in like, the roles these are, setting and closing, if there's no leads, there's no leads. You can't really earn too much money from it, because if you're the setter and you don't have anyone to talk to all day, all the leads are super low quality for a few months. My perspective is having more than one offer, as long as it's manageable and you're not working fucking 15 hours a day, it makes a lot more sense, because you're never dependent on that one thing. But I'm curious as to your perspective on it, buddy, because you're the guy training the setters. What would you sort of say to that sort of point in terms of like one offer versus 2 offers? Because you could maybe work on an offer that is a bit newer if they have, good commission, seems like a good opportunity, and then also be working on one that's like, they have 10 setters, they're all learning X, Y, Z. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I haven't explicitly thought about that before. I think in closers, I think I can see a lot of use cases where that makes sense, is like you're basically hedging yourself against one stream of a business, right? So I get that. But the thing with closers is, again, not a catch-all, but typically they're more experienced, they're more skilled, and they have an ability to juggle different things because they're probably a bit more like mature, if you will, at least professionally, maybe not age-wise, but they're just that like, this is, if you get to a point where you're working for two businesses as a closer, like you're pretty much a solid individual, like you're pretty good to go. Setting, I think, is different because you're typically like, you may very well be learning a brand new industry, learning a brand new skill, and just trying to orient into like the online world at all. So I think it's a bit different. My recommendation would just be to choose one in terms of setting, because another thing is like, I could see closers hedging themselves with two companies. I get that to protect themselves, but like setters, you are the lead flow. Obviously the lead quality, and you need leads to call, and there needs to be leads in the Facebook group and the DM. But again, that goes to the due diligence, is like, hopefully you do a good enough job up front, or, the business is honest enough up front where you can kind of hash it out a little bit. But that would be my recommendation, is just to be onto one and really focus, because I think the setting for me, at least in my experience, and like how I, even when I was actually doing the setting, I was so internally focused on the input and just getting better regardless of the outcome. And I think that flips as you get into closing as well, because you move into closing, it's like, cool, now I'm good enough and I want to start earning money. Obviously, like, it makes sense. And there's nothing wrong with that, as people should, right? As I did as well when I started closing. Like, of course you want to do that. But as setting, it's like, it's almost just as important to have the opportunity than it is to earn a bunch of money as a setter, right? And that's why it's like, hopefully setters are getting into the industry where they don't need to make a bunch of money right now, like yesterday, right? It's like, hey, maybe not the best time for you, maybe a part-time thing, or keep learning and, save up some money. Because if you're trying to get in and trying to learn a new skill, learn a new industry, and earn money, it's like that can be a lot at once. But I think just focusing on one thing, getting really good at it, and then just putting in the reps and like increasing your skill level to the point where you can actually be, fairly reasonable, because it's almost like a handshake. And this is, as a setter, it's like a handshake with money, that it's like, I'm going to consciously delay the payoff on the money, and I'm going to put myself in an opportunity and position to build my skill, because without the skill, I'm never going to earn the money anyways. Even if the end goal is to transition into closing, which I think most people want to do. And there's nothing wrong with being a really good setter and still making 10, 20K a month, because there's people that do that as well. It doesn't matter. But in both of those scenarios, if you're ever going to close and get to 10, 20K plus per month, or if you're ever going to be the setter who earns 10, 20K plus per month, your skill level is one of the best in the industry. So it doesn't matter either way. So that's how my brain worked. And I was like, well, you better get to work then. Like, fuck the money. You better get to work, and you better put yourself in a position where you can learn and you can actually just do the reps without context switching, right? Because you're learning something new. Like, I don't want to learn 2 different offers and 2 different industries and 2 different, businesses and workflows. I'm just like, dude, just give me one thing to do, and I'm just going to focus on doing that. And I'm going to commit for 3 months, pull my head up, see where I'm at. Commit for 3 months, pull my head up, see where I'm at. And then that would just be my recommendation for like, in that case. But I hadn't thought about that before. That's a good question.
I think it's very smart as well, man, especially with what you're saying. Because like, especially if you're new to the industry, right? Like, you don't really understand a lot of the terminology, kind of how businesses work, and, or kind of just a lot of the back end stuff that no one really tells you about. And so having that, like you said, right, that sort of just get your fucking head down and just learn the skill. The money will come when the skill set's there. And like, for me, at least, I never really tried to focus too much on my commission. What I really tried to focus on was my skills. Because I knew if I got the best fucking skill set in the world, like, I will earn money, like that will come. But if I just focus on getting better and better and better every single day, eventually, whether it's, 2 months down the line, whether it's 8 months down the line, you're going to be outperforming everyone. And you'll be like, like you said, you'll poke your head up. You'll be like, oh shit, I'm fucking smashing it. Let's see if I can get a closing position, or let's see if I can, maybe get another offer now, because now I understand the business, I understand the industry, I understand how to set, and the skill set is there. So now you're only learning a small piece of information, rather than having to learn every single thing about, like, psychology and DM setting, the right words to say, when to say them, questions to ask, cadences, and all these other things. Now you're just learning a different piece of a business, because you understand back end, you understand fulfillment and everything. So like, I resonate with that a lot, because like we said, right, shiny object syndrome is going to kill you. The grass is always going to be greener somewhere, but you can make the grass green where you are now. Water your garden, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Focus on the skill set. Absolutely just smash it as much as you can. And, don't get me wrong, if you're the top setter and you're earning 3K a month and no one's earning more than that, maybe look at another opportunity.
I agree. Exactly. Yeah. It just depends on what stage. And that's something that even with the setters that I talk to and stuff like that, I just hope to give people reality checks, because I feel like sometimes, they come in with just and it's no fault of their own, because like, how could they know any better? Right.
Yeah. And also all the marketing's like, earn X, do this.
That's what I mean. And they're just like,
work from anywhere in the world.
They're coming in with one perspective, and it's just like, hey, this is kind of what it's going to be. If you're cool with that, then we can do that. If not, then I'd recommend doing this or something else. But I try to just be like always as transparent and just realistic with people as possible. Is like, it's almost, setting is almost like selling a fitness offer, I think, in the space, where a fitness offer is like, you're, basically helping people like give up bad habits, do tough things, and pay money for it. It's the same thing kind of with setting, where it's like, hey man, it's going to fucking suck. It's not going to be easy. No one's really, really going to help you do that. And you're not going to earn a lot. So like, and sometimes people are like, when can I start? And then you're like, cool. That guy or girl is going to be very good in the future. It's just going to take some time to kind of get there. And it's exactly like, that was the same thing when I joined. I was like, cool. Like, I was like, absolutely, let's do the thing. I'm cool with all that. And I'll see you in 6 months. Like, that was my complete mindset. But I don't think, I was also living at home at the time. And like, I didn't have tons of responsibilities. I didn't have tons of bills. So it was very intentional. I even went and got a second job for 5 months, because I knew that it was just a sacrifice that I was willing to make. And I was like, it was that intentional and conscious handshake. So that would be just another recommendation, is like, whether you're getting in as a setter or as a closer, but typically nowadays people are just breaking into the industry more as setters, because I think people are starting to understand like breaking in as a true closer, quite difficult. I mean, that'd be really, really hard to do, like, for sure.
Yeah.
It's just
be
like
incredibly difficult to just go from nothing to being a high level closer. Conscious and intentional.
Conscious and intentional about the journey you're about to start, why you're doing what you're doing, what the realistic expectations are going to be, because it's not necessarily going to be pretty. But if you're willing to do all of those things for a time period so that you can put yourself in a position in the future, like, that's something that helped me, where it's kind of like the difference between having like a fake ass or working like, you know what I mean? Working
Getting
for
a BBL.
that ass. Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's like, cool. In 3 years, you have the same product, but it's not just about the product. It's like, who did you turn into, and who was required to become that product over that time period to achieve the thing? Because people can't take that from you. And I think that's something that has really helped me, is like, because I went and did the thing for that long and kind of didn't really earn, and I kind of delayed the gratification. I built a character in myself where once I was through that time, like, nobody can take that from me. Nobody can take that hard work from me. Nobody can take that sacrifice. The times where I had the second job for the 5 months, and I'd close my laptop from doing dials, and I'd go to my second job and go deliver food. And then I'd deliver food on the weekends. And I was like, people, you know what I mean? So now when I transitioned into closing, as I was fortunate enough to start doing that, I was like, wow, this is, well, number one, it's crazy because people actually want to talk to me. Right? Like, that's nice, because I was fucking outbound calling. Yeah. I was like, that's interesting. People actually want to chat with me. But it's just like, I carried that level of grit into my closing, and then into just where I'm at today. And it really just kind of transformed me and helped me like become the person that I am, which is ridiculous. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying that setting's like, the end all be all, making it sound like that, but you basically put yourself in an environment to do very difficult thing over a long period of time with no payoff. And I think regardless of what domain that's done in, like, you will be a better person for it.
One thing I would sort of touch on that is like, there is a payoff. The payoff might not be monetary, but it will be skill set. It will be mindset. It will be grit. It will be your determination, your drive, your discipline. That's really the payoff in terms of like doing setting. Because once you've learned those skills, like in terms of like, what to say, how to say it, but also all the other stuff coming with that, like, it makes life so much easier. Because then whenever you're having hard things happen in a closing role, nothing compared to what you went through when you're doing setting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like when I was doing 200-300 calls a day, I was selling an energy and for an energy company, trying to get people's bills cheaper. It would be like, hey, I'm from XYZ, dunk. I'm from X, bunk, dunk, bunk, 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 getting hung up constantly.
Yeah.
And, like now if someone hangs up, I don't give a fuck. Like, all right, you're lost, buddy, no worries.
Yeah.
And you also, it builds that, like we said, it really builds that grit, which is something you can't just magically manufacture from thinking about it a lot, right? You have to go through the grind and you have to go and embrace that suck for a long period of time. And then you come out on the other side of it and you're a different person.
Yeah. And I think tangibly with the skill set, it helps you in a lot of ways that I think might be overlooked. Is like, number one is just the cadence of conversation, especially when you're doing outbound dialing, because just catching the ball and interacting sharply and quickly. When you call a bunch of people for a long period of time, you just get good at talking to humans. And I think that's overlooked in sales, is the cadence of just having a conversation at such a volume. It's like, dude, if you outbound set for 6 months, you're talking to so many more people than somebody who's closing. Because at closing, it's like, cool, you're talking to 4 to 10 people a day, let's say, right? And it's like in setting, you could talk to 10 to 25 a day, every day for 6 straight months. So you can gap up really quickly in just the cadence of conversation. And then in terms of the actual skill is like, you have that kind of tenacity and that grit. So as you start closing, like my follow-up, and maybe because I sucked at sales, but like my follow-up was at least 50% of my closes, right? So like probably a bit of both, to be honest, but I was also really good at follow-up because I came from 8 months, 8 months of outbound. So I was like, cool. This is fucking easy. Like I will follow up with you forever because I just came from this domain. Plus we've already talked together. Plus there's some level of commitment or interest. So like I'm there. And now you start closing people 3-6 months later because you're used to doing the follow-up. And then the third and the last thing is like, you kind of become marketing proof. You hedge yourself against marketing because, dude, leads go down. I'm on the dialer. I'm just back to where I was for 7 months. Like, I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm just hammering, I'm setting triages. I'm doing outbounds. I'm setting sales calls. People are like, the leads are down. I'm like, for you, they are, but like, I'm just going to go start calling people. And it's just, you just kind of build like a fearlessness to your sales IQ and EQ that I think, again, can't be taken from you. So it's not just, like you'd mentioned, also the person you become, but very tangibly translatable skill sets as you move into closing. And if closers did get the Brazilian butt lift, right? They just don't have those skill sets. So it's like, hey, it'll take me a while to get there, but one day we'll end up on the same plane. And the difference between like what it took to get there versus what it took the other person to get there will play out on that field when we are even in the future.
Oh, 100%,
opportunity.
100%. Like I remember one of the offers I was working on for a couple of years. I was following up with a guy for 1.5 years until I closed the deal. But it took that long because of like, all sorts of bullshit objections, all sorts of stuff going on. But like, I just never gave up on it. And one day he texted me, he's like, Harlan, I'm ready to go. Let's do it. And I'm like, okay, cool. Finally, fucking hell, man. But I think like as well, nothing in sales is a big deal unless you make it a big deal, right? Like whether it's calling someone, sending someone a DM, whether it's sending an email, whatever it is. And the only reason it would be hard is if you decide it's going to be hard. Like calling 100, 200, 300 people in a day. It's only difficult if you're like, oh God, fuck. I have to do this. Like Jeremy Minor, he earned a couple million in commission. He'd do 3 hours of cold calling every day. Every day. And he was the top performer in the company and earned like, I think 10 times more than everyone else. Because he had built that skill and he never let it go, and he always had the tenacity, the drive and the skill set. And that over time, that only got sharper and sharper. He only got better and better. And now he's like one of the best in the business. Like a mentor of mine, Marshall Wilkinson, he would always do cold calling, even when he was earning 1, 2, 3 million plus a year, just because he loved it. He loved getting on the phone with people and just like doing the hard shit. Because then into meetings, negotiating 300 million plus deals, as in dollar deals, a piece of piss, It's just these people want to talk to me. I don't have to battle through getting them on the phone or battle through opening a line of communication. We're already here. And now it's just using the newer skill set, i.e. closing the deal to get that done. And the setting thing, it never goes away. Like it all relates to sport. If you've ever played a sport, the best person in your team, the reason they were probably the best is they did a lot of shit that you didn't do. Maybe you were the best, right? You did a lot of stuff that no one else did. You trained after hours, you did extra training sessions, you worked on your mindset, you kept your diet on point. It's all the same shit, whether it's sports, whether it's sales, or just life in general, right? If you want to get ahead, do the things other people aren't doing, and also understand you're not going to get there today. It's not just going to happen. No one's, I don't know, I don't really believe as well that some people have the gift of the gab, right? The gift of the gab is a skill. Some people, they get it built when they're a kid because they have a difficult life. They have to learn how to talk with, people very well, and they've developed it then, and now they have the gift of the gab. But you don't see that. You just see, oh my God, this guy's amazing. He's just come in and he smashed it. Yeah, because he had like 10, 15 years as a child where life was really fucking hard and he had to build up those skills. But that's really where it comes from, right? And I think for people getting into the sales world, you have to have the right expectations that you're not going to come in with no skills and be, earning 10, 15, 20, 50,000 a month like you see some people are, because they are not you and you are not them. And it's really important as well to only measure yourself against yourself. Very big. Like, one thing I like to do is sort of look at, where was I a year ago today? What was I doing a year ago today? What were my skill sets like? What was my mindset like? What was my life outside of sales like a year ago today? And when you only compare yourself to that, not some fucking guru on Instagram, you become very proud of yourself. Like for you, if you look back to when you started in sales, I bet if you listen to a sales call, you'd be like, oh God, disgusting. What was I doing, right? But it also makes you feel very proud of where you're at now, because you're like, shit, man, I was that bad and now I'm here. And you can listen to a sales call and you're like, shit, that actually sounds pretty fucking good. Nice. Come on, man. Awesome. You know what I mean?
Makes sense. Yeah. No, and as you're like, something that popped in my mind as well is just as it's kind of funny because like I feel like setting as well. This is what people might misinterpret is like closing, because some people do make quite a bit of money closing. They think it's like easier. Like closing is more difficult than setting, all things equal. Like it is just, there's more going on. Like it's takes more skill. It's just, there's more moving parts. There's more complexity. It requires more of you than setting. And sometimes, maybe people look at closers like, oh, that's where it gets easy because now I start making that money. It's like, cool. Like, dude, it gets fucking harder. And that's what's cool about setting, because it's like a natural filter process where it's like, hey, if you don't get through setting, like you're never going to make a career out of closing anyways. Like, it kind of filters the individuals who think they want to be closers because they think they want to earn that type of money, and the people who actually have what it takes to become closers and earn that type of money. And for me, it's like, well, just let the process and let the journey kind of self-select. People will self-select. And the people that are falling off, it's probably best for them anyways. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Like, it doesn't matter. But even for them, it's like, hey, it's just, that's going to be more difficult. Like, it's only going to get harder. So you might as well know early. Like, you might as well know now as a setter with no risk on the business versus a closer coming in and wasting a bunch of money for the business and pumping leads to them, which I hope, the business deserves that if that's the case anyways. And then the other thing that popped up too, man, is like, another thing just about the sales industry in general is I think setting's a good place to start for like most people, because a lot of people haven't ever done anything hard in their life. Right. Like, and I feel like that's where like a sporting background or a bodybuilding background or a military background, like those are the backgrounds where you just grew up doing difficult shit and you grew up sacrificing and you grew up just grinding and getting after it. And you grew up in a competitive environment and you grew up doing tough things for so long that it's a very lateral move to sales where it's like, oh, this is the same thing with a different skill set. I can do this. I've literally done this for 20 years, 30 years, 40. Like, this is my domain. This is where I come from. I just need to learn a different skill now. Like, rather than doing things this way, I can just learn sales. But I think for people that have never done something hard, where like as you get into setting, it's like, cool, that could be the first really hard domain or pursuit or journey that they've jumped in. And it's like, those people just get obliterated, dude. Like, it's like, fuck,
Well,
2
for some
weeks,
people,
3
the
weeks,
hardest
like
thing in their life is like
gone,
the Wi-Fi
dude.
doesn't work for an hour.
Like they're just gone. Yeah.
And like crying in the corner, I don't have any Wi-Fi. Well, how am I going to watch YouTube? Oh my God.
It's like the perfect battle test. It's like the perfect battle test too. And I think like it's like the longer I stay in the industry as well, I do have, and I'm not sure if other people think this way either, but like I do have a sense of like there's lots of pros and cons to the industry as well. But what I do, no matter who's in the industry and been in the industry, I do have a level of respect for them because I know how hard it is. Regardless if you're a setter, if you're a closer, if you're a business owner, coach, consult, like I don't care. Mm-hmm. It's like, bro, if you're in this domain for even like over 6 months or a year, it's like I respect that guy or girl because already you've done things that other people mostly wouldn't do. So there's also a sense, it's kind of fucked up, but there might be a sense of satisfaction for me where it's like, this is the space over here. It's like, cool, go through that process. And if you don't make it, then you don't deserve to be on this side. But if you make it, like high five, like good for you. You got what it takes. Like fucking let's get to work, right? Like I'll go to war. Man. I'll go to war with people like that. But it's like the perfect filtering process where it's like, all right, like let's see what happens. And I feel like if you don't come from a domain of doing hard shit your whole life, or you haven't had adversity, you haven't had to overcome things, like sales is just gonna knock your head off. Like you're just not gonna make it.
I couldn't agree with you more on that, buddy, because like a lot of the most successful business people, sales people that I've ever met, they've always had a lot of adversity in some form of their life, whether it is sport, whether it's you have a really tough upbringing, you know, like life's really difficult, you have poor parents, you only have one parent, they're never at home, they don't give you love, affection, joy. Like that creates you and builds you into a tough person. Like one of my favorite quotes, and I can't remember who said it, is like, tough times create hard men, or hard times create tough men create easy times create weak men. And then the cycle continues, right? And I feel like now we're mostly living in a time where it is very easy. And so there's a lot of, you know, weak people out there where the most scary thing they're going to do today is walk outside and speak to a stranger at the shop when they're buying something. Oh, that's terrifying, right? But if you're someone who's had like, you know, a sporting background, you've dealt with, you know, I don't know, depression, anxiety, a lot of pain in your life, doing that short shit's easy because you know how difficult shit can get. You know how hard times can be. And then doing this is great. Someone says, fuck you on the phone. It's like, all right, man, no worries. Next, let's go. Right. And it's nothing. But a lot of people, they don't, like you said, they don't have that adversity, these tough times, these challenge in their life. And because of that, they have no character, right? Like I notice now there's a lot of sort of like adult children around, you know, like 30, 40 years old. They still live with their parents and they get paid pocket money. They don't have a job. They just play Xbox all day and they're fat as fuck sitting on the sofa eating Doritos. Like, and that's a crazy thing for me because I could never imagine that being me, right? But I know some people, they've never been pushed to do difficult shit. And then, you know, they think that going into doing DM setting is going to be a piece of piss because it's like, yeah, I work on my laptop or just type some stuff and that's it. That's not just it. There's so much more going on with it that people don't ever realize. And to get to a point in sales where like you are one of the top 1% of salespeople, you need to go through a lot of adversity and challenge. Because once you've been through adversity and challenge, you understand what you don't want and you also know what you do want. So you kind of have this push and pull, right? You're being pushed away from the things that you don't want and pulled towards the things that you do. And that never stops. Like The Rock he has a really good speech. He spoke to the LA Lakers about it. He was sort of talking through like his life story and like why his company is called $7 Productions, because he got to a point after playing professional football and he got dropped from the team, blah, 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 where he was sat on the side of the road with $7 in his pockets, nothing to his name. After his whole life, he thought, I'm going to be a professional footballer. And now he's The Rock, right? Everyone fucking knows him, worth almost $1 billion, right? And he said, like, I always keep the tough times in my mind. My back is always against the wall, no matter how successful I become. Because when you have that, you have nowhere to go but forwards. And a lot of people, they always have a safeguard, a plan B, plan C, plan D. When you don't have any of that, and it's just, I want to have X outcome and I want to learn X skills and I want to do that because I want more fulfillment out of my life, right? you're going to be so much more powerful than the person's like, oh, this could be all right. I'll do a bit of this for a bit. There's no drive. There's no willpower. And then that's why they sort of get to a point where they stall out, they fall off, and then they never become anything. And next thing you know, they're 30, 40 years old, living in their parents' basement, eating Doritos on the sofa, playing Xbox. Right? It's a very weird life. But I completely agree with you, buddy. Life ain't easy. You got to choose your hard, right? Do you want a hard life being poor as fuck with no skill set? Or do you want a hard life because you push to actually get the things that you want, help people, get fulfillment, joy, love, and happiness? Both is going to be difficult, but which one would you rather, right? So, Ryan, man, we're kind of coming up to the end of our time here, brother. I'd love it if you could just kind of like, tell people a bit about what you do, how they can find out about you guys, how they can maybe work with you or something like that. It was great having you on, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on too, man. That hour flew by, so it was good chatting. And I hope Joel's all right. Seriously, I know he DM'd me, so hopefully he's not too bad. But
I saw him in the comments, man.
Maybe I scared him. Maybe I scared him off. He was like, "Yeah, right, yeah, yeah, man." So we have a Facebook group, Setter Central. If you type that in, so just Setter, SETTER, and then Central, CENTRAL. So we have our Facebook group where we have a lot of like free training. So a lot of the B2B training that I'm doing on that side, we kind of cut, repurpose, and then we post in the group, which is cool for me selfishly, because it's like, oh, I'm already doing the training. Like, let's just repurpose it and repost it. And hopefully, it helps one person kind of come across and say, oh, that's interesting. And yeah, so that there's lots of stuff in there, but really that Facebook group is just kind of a springboard into our circle community. So it's Setter Circle. So if you guys go to settercentral.co, so settercentral.co, it'll take you to our landing page. Really tiny landing page, but I wrote the copy on my copy and I wrote the copy on Danny's copy. It's jokes. I'd recommend you guys go read that. It's pretty funny. And then if you guys click on like the join here, it'll take you to Circle. So Circle is like where we have the 6 free training portals. So we have like a Setter Mentality. Erica is just uploading her like DM setting course in there. We have outbound setting, triage setting, and then we have landing and opportunity, and we also have the vault. So those are 6 free portals. Those are quite concise and they're edited and they're jump cut, and it's just pretty easy to bang through those. But they're all free. Those 6 portals are free. So that would be really the best place to go in terms of like, hey, I want to learn more about the skill specifically. And then outside of that, we have a couple of things in the works coming up, but my DMs are always open. You guys can just hit me up if you guys have questions or anything. Like, also in the Circle community, the reason we went there is because you guys can post, you can ask questions under the videos, you guys can introduce yourselves, you guys can network in terms of the community. So yeah, either the Facebook group, but the Facebook group is to move you to Circle so that you can actually get there, because that's where you guys learn the most. So
that's where the juice is, huh?
For the juices, buddy. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's wicked, man. So yeah, Ryan, brother, I really appreciate you coming on, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. This is probably the first time that you and I have actually been speaking together face to face. But yeah, you're great, mate. Love all the stuff that you guys are up to. I think you're going to make a really meaningful difference for a lot of people getting into the industry, man. So
thank you.
Again, looking forward to doing something again with you in the future, buddy. And enjoy the rest of your day. And for everyone watching, thank you so much for actually coming on, engaging with the live. Drop a comment as to sort of any big takeaways. And again, if you guys ever need me, if you ever need Ryan, DMs are always open. We're happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
All right. Cheers, everyone. Take care. Bye.